What's up, everyone? It's GaijinGamer here, back with episode 3 of How to Be a Noob in King's Raid 2021. Today we'll be discovering what it means to build teams, whether it be physical or magical, and just give you some rough recommendations of where to start as a newer player. And today we're going to start with healers. And as you can see, we've got almost all. This list of characters can be quite daunting, especially if you're a new player. Where is a good place to start? What heroes, might take a higher level investment to make work pretty well? And just like overall best healers for the best content and what I'd recommend for newer players. So first things up, we have Fallen Frey. Now Fallen Frey is widely considered the best healer regardless if you're magical or physical team in the game. She puts out immense shields, especially with her unique trinket that affects her shields, as well as just increases the attack power of your highest level attack power in the party, which will be your main DPS. And then she just adds a percentage of her attack to their attack, which makes it absolutely insane, as well as providing other buffs. And her soul weapon also gives a amp as well. An amp is basically just something that increases the party's overall damage. So she's absolutely insane and is considered an all-around healer. Next up, a more free-to-play option for you. And also, I failed to mention that Fallen Frey is also free-to-play once you get to Chapter 9 of the storyline. You have to actually beat Chapter 9. You can't just get there. So once you beat Chapter 9, you can then unlock an area where you're able to unlock prior, event dungeon heroes. And in fact, I believe Shockmay will probably eventually be going there as well. But that's an area, once you beat 923, I believe, you can then enter that dungeon and get Fallen Frey for free. So she's an awesome healer to consider when you're doing your all-in-one summons at the beginning. Next up, a healer that will get you through until Chapter 923, and that is regular Frey. Now, she didn't always used to be the best, but she's gotten buffed, and she's definitely kind of a force to be reckoned with. She kind of falls short of Fallen Frey, unfortunately, but she also provides basically the same kit. She's got heals. Instead of like a penetration on her unique weapon, she provides crit rate. So she's awesome and highly recommended to build, and it'll get you through those early chapters where you can then get your Fallen Frey and really start, progressing to the later game. So when it comes to she's also an all-around healer. She can heal for both physical or magical teams, which just makes her a great start at the beginning. Next up, we have Lias. Now she's basically a mana battery. She could be used for both physical and magical teams. I really recommend her. She's really awesome, and she doesn't really require that much investment to be that fantastic. Now, the last all-around healer I will mention is Shay. However, she is definitely not beginner friendly, so for you newer players out there, you may want to reconsider building Shay initially, but may be something to look at later on in the game, as she provides a large amount of damage reduction to your team. However, she needs at least a 4-star weapon to do so, and preferably a 5-star, to be quite honest. However, she's definitely a force to be reckoned with once you build her properly, and yeah, she's awesome. So next up, for the physical healer specifically, we have Evan. Now Evan is an absolute monster, especially when the physical teams are considered kind of meta in the game right now, especially with ESTELLE coming out for the anniversary. It'll be interesting to see what her kit looks like, but physical kind of dominates the game in all facets of the endgame content as of right now. So yeah, Evan would be a great choice if you're thinking about building a physical team, which I'll kind of cover later in the video, what some physical comps may look like, but he's a great option to choose. Maybe not initially. Frey can kind of get you to, through the early game, and then you can kind of decide if Evan might be something you want to look into later on once you start expanding your team. Next up, we have our girl Rahatna. Now she's awesome, also kind of physically based. However, she also can kind of go all around in the longer content. Now you have content modes in this where it's just a boss. Rahatna is not necessarily the best selection for those stages because she actually gets stronger as the number of stages progresses. She is, I think, the best healer, or maybe second best, second to Fallen Frey in Eclipse. But due to the number of stages involved, and she can max out her ability to just give crit damage as well as some other goodness, and she's just an awesome hero to have as well if you're running a physical team. But she's kind of niche. However, she also does provide a stun, and she's just a great healer to consider as well. I really actually recommend her, even if you're not doing a physical team. Next up we have Juno, and she's an NPC hero, which I'll kind of explain in my further guides, but basically she's not as easy to obtain, but with these newer player benefits as well as the anniversary event happening, you're able to get some of the currency in order to unlock these heroes a little bit faster. So I'll kind of include her in here. She's a great option. She used to be the best option prior to Fallen Frey and Evan dropping for physical teams. However, she's kind of fallen off the radar, so I'll just kind of put her at the end there. And then lastly, for magical healers, we're kind of left with Mei. Now, Mei is behind Fallen Frey, I think is the best magic healer option, as she provides buffs, heals, and is just an awesome force to be reckoned with on a magical team. Now, this list is kind of based off of beginner players, so if you don't see the likes of Annette or Lavril or some other healers you may like, it's because I don't really feel that they're probably the best options for newer players. I failed to mention that Mei is also an NPC healer, but if you're running a magic team, I definitely recommend you start unlocking her as fast as possible, and I'll show you how to do that in one of my later guides. But Annette and Lavril are more so of utility. They're not really dedicated healers. You can't really run them as a healer in a four-team comp. So for this guide, these are just strictly for healers, and something that you could definitely kind of get through the higher level chapters with as well. Alright guys, and now we're going to jump into tanks. And now, just prior to doing so, I just want to give you guys a heads up. These are all based on my opinions. However, I've had multiple chances to re-roll and progress through the game as a newer player. So these are just some of the opinions that I've derived from doing, progressing through the games multiple times, and what make your experience just the easiest. However, I do recommend you play heroes that you like, and these are all based on my opinion. So first off, also this is a PvE guide. I'm not quite the best at PvP just quite yet. However, I hope to become better in the throughout this series. But this is just strictly speaking for PvE, as there's a completely different tier list for PvP. So first up, we got the physical tanks. Now, ever since Shockmay has dropped, he's kind of taken Kingsraid by a storm. He is quite literally probably up there with Loman for the top tank for a physical team. He's awesome. Not only does he increase the attack of your team, but he self-heals quite a lot. He just, he stuns. He just kind of has a little bit of it all. It's actually quite insane. He actually got nerfed when it comes to PvP, as allegedly he was one-shotting people, and I just find that quite hilarious. We got some pretty good nerf rewards out of it though, and also a soulstone transfer ticket and a unique weapon and treasure transfer tickets for him. So that's another reason to build him, as you can always change it later if he becomes irrelevant. So next up we have Loman, and he was the reigning king, and he potentially still could be. However, he is a NPC hero, and it's harder to get the weapons for Loman as well as just obtain them in general right off the beginning. So I kind of put them on a even tier. They're both great heroes. Loman can also stun. He's got a heal when you get a soul weapon, on a 1 or 2, I believe. And he's just an all-around amazing hero, and brings some good physical amps to the team, as well as Shockmay. Next up, we have Klaus. Now, he's our free-to-play option, assuming that you're not able to grab Shockmay in the story dungeon event right off the beginning. If you're building a physical team, kind of free-to-play, Klaus is definitely our go-to guy here, as he is quite a good tank. I've actually used him even in the late game. He kind of falls off towards the end because he just kind of provides, an attack and defense buff, and he just doesn't quite give the same physical amps that these other two at the beginning here do. And honestly, Philip, who we'll put next here, kind of he probably overtakes Klaus towards the end as well. But Klaus is very solid, and he will definitely progress you to the point where you can start unlocking some of these story dungeon heroes after completing Chapter 9. Philip's awesome. He shreds, physical defense as well as giving a physical amp. And then, yeah, he kind of fell off. He used to be the king of physical tanks until Loman came around. And now Shockmay's kind of vying for that spot due to his availability. But if you have Loman fully invested, he's still a great option. Next up, we have Glenwish. She's kind of like an all-around tank. Nothing too crazy. She's a great tank, don't get me wrong. Like all of these are great tanks in the right situation. However, she used to be fantastic. However, she's just kind of like a generalist instead of anything special. Unfortunately, she's just kind of fallen off. So for magical tanks, we have a few options. We have Neuraxis. He's awesome. I actually probably would recommend Neuraxis over Jhin. I just find that he dies a lot less. Even though, Jhin's still a good option. She kind of amps a little bit more than Neuraxis does, but Neuraxis gives non-boss damage or non-hero. He basically gives a layer of damage that increases the damage done quite immensely as well. So he's definitely a viable option. I think I'd recommend him over Jhin, who we have up next. But if you like an undead lolly girl, I don't blame you for picking Jhin either. She carries around a coffin. She smacks people with it. She gives great magical amps. Once she dies, she kind of heals up and resurrects. However, I do just find her a little bit squishier than Neuraxis up at the front there. And then lastly, we have Sonya. She's definitely a more niche PvP tank, so I don't quite know too much about her, but I just know that she's viable. There's a few more other options in here that I just realized I didn't have quite up there. We have Mora, and she becomes better on later in the game. She definitely scales better as you progress and are able to level up her unique weapon. I just don't recommend her at the beginning of the game, as well as a Celica once I'm able to find her here. And she's also just kind of your high-end boss damage tank, and she's not necessarily used for anything besides scoring content. So newer players, I would personally avoid these heroes, but if you'd like to, those are options as well. Alright, next up we have a main DPS slot, and that'll be both for physical and magical. We'll start with physical, and honestly, I debated making her own tier, but the first, character we'll talk about is Panceroni, or Panceroni. She is absolutely broken. I think almost everyone that you talk to in King's Raid will kind of give you the same sentiment. She's insane, does the highest tier of damage in most scoring content besides the magical boss. She's easy to clear the chapters with. However, she does get quite boring just because there's no struggle involved with her. It's absolutely wild. So if you're looking to just breeze through the content and just kind of auto everything, Panceroni might be your best option. Now, who I'm thinking about doing my playthrough as is our boy Chase. He's a alpha male. He recently got buffed. One of his trinkets gives non-hero damage. He's doing absolutely insane damage, and he's just fun to watch and play with. I love his play style. I know my boy Twe out there is killing it with Chase, and I'm debating if I want to start him as well. Next up, we have Rebel Klaus. He's pretty awesome. He definitely will clear every one of the content with you. He's unlocked with the hero dungeon after clearing chapter 9, so just keep that in mind. You won't necessarily be able to play him right away. You can get him for free after completing chapter 9. Next up, we'll go with a free-to-play option here, and that is our boy Roy. Now, he has almost, I think, way back when King's Raid first came out, he was meta, and he quickly fell off the map once some of these, newer heroes started coming out, and our boy is back to stay. He recently got a buff in a big way. I saw him do 14 trillion on one of the world bosses. He's in a good spot right now. He'll definitely get you through all of the chapters, and he'll make it sort of easy for you at the end game if you choose to play through with Roy, especially as a free-to-play player. Maybe something you consider. But if I was you, this is the slot that I would use my tier 5 level 100 ticket at, because not only is your DPS the most important to level up, but your unique weapon that you also choose will scale with the level, as well as it'll just give you more options to play with for your main DPS and create a team around whatever character you so choose to do. Next up, we have Gladdy. Now, he used to be an absolute unit as well. He's definitely still great. He's an NPC hero, so he's a little harder to get, but he's also still a very great option. Next up we have Cecilia, and she's awesome. Not as not as super great in PvE chapters, but more so for scoring content and in-game content. She doesn't really have AoE attacks as much, so she kind of falls off in chapters as things tend to swarm you, and it just kind of takes forever to kill everything. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend Cecilia until later game, and yeah, I mean, it's up to you though. She's still pretty cool, and I do love her playstyle, so just take everything with a grain of salt that I'm saying. Next up, we'll kind of transition to magical DPS, our main DPS. First up, we have Lorraine. She's a free-to-play option. She's great. She absolutely kills it. She recently got buffed, and yeah, she can do every content in the game, and she kind of makes it easy because she has so many stuns, AoEs, and she does really awesome single target damage as well. Next up, we'll discuss Kersey. She's awesome as well, pretty much the same for the same reasons as Lorraine. Honestly, these two could probably be switched in any circumstance. However, I do think that Lorraine kind of beats out an Eclipse due to her low mana costs, and both of these are just absolutely insane and free to play and great for magical teams. Then we'll discuss Zarya. She's an awesome unit to play. She's not free to play, however. But she can complete all content in the game, and a lot of people use her for a boss called Shakme, which we'll kind of cover in the later guides. And she's awesome. She does great damage. Most of these characters are basically the same thing. We got Ezekiel. He's a great option for magical. We have Zarya, great option for magical. We have Rapine, great option for magical. Theo. Finally, we have Ezekiel. Now, all of these are great options for main DPS if you so choose to make any of these characters, but almost every one of these characters below here can be turned into a main DPS and just kind of being used, especially with the 5-star unique weapon. Almost all of the characters below here, that are considered main DPS will make the content extremely trivial. So, just kind of play what you like and build the team what you like, but these are just some ideas that just might make your journey just that much easier. So last, we'll kind of just move on to supports. Next up, before team making, we've got the supports, and now this is kind of tricky, as most characters can kind of be considered support in some capacity or another. But what I like to consider for supports are just some characters that either A, reduce cooldown, or give a great amp, that aren't considered healers or tanks, and aren't traditionally really in the main DPS slot as well. However, there are a few exceptions to that policy. So first up, we've got Annette and Lavril. They're both awesome. They're not really traditional healers, however, they can off-heal quite well. They have a ton of buffs. They're awesome to have. I would run both, and either they're kind of traditionally focused towards magic, so they kind of amp magic slightly better. However, they're so good they can also support physical, and oftentimes are ran in physical teams as well. Same with our boy Adi here, although he's more so just kind of purely cooldown reduction. He's great to pair with Panceroni, and they make quite the dynamic duo when it comes to scoring content. For physical support, we have Gal, Miruru, and Lacrack. They're all free to play and all great viable options. You can actually get a 2-star hero selector, I think in chapter 2, just by beating the missions and obtaining enough stars that you can unlock all 3 of these. Gao's more of a single target stunner. He does have some AoE. He can also stun quite more, in AoE capacity as well. However, the Miruru can also stun, is more of like an AoE specialist. Lacrack also stuns, and he's more of like a single target stunner though. Next up, we've got Nyla, Priscilla, Raquina, and Gladdy. And those are they're all here because they're great options if you choose to make a physical comp. These might be options that you consider putting in a support slot when we discuss team comps later on. Now, here's the exceptions to the policy, where for support for magical, we have Lorraine and Kersey. Now, we put these in the main DPS slot as well, and these 2 units are just so good that they can also be, as well as Gladdy, although he's an NPC hero, hard to get. But all these heroes are so good that they kind of fill 2 roles where they can both be a main DPS but also have the abilities to support with how many stuns or amps they give, and they're just great heroes all around. Now we have Gremory. She's definitely a nice support for Magic Team, and then Visca is the other one that I would just recommend for Magical Teams. Now this is not a full list of all the supports, as the support slot is the trickiest to kind of judge, but for newer players I'd kind of recommend some of these heroes when kind of focusing on your team building, which we'll follow up here next. Finally, something for your new or returning players is just a statistics tab that you'll unlock after completing chapter 2 or 3, I believe, and it'll be right here located at the bottom of your screen. And this will allow you, if there's a hero I didn't cover or something you're interested in, or a playstyle that you really like of another character, you can kind of come over here to the hero statistics tab, and it's going to give you data on any hero in the game. We'll just kind of click on a hero here. We'll go with Demia. As we did not cover her in any of the guides today, and we'll just kind of look at how she's ranked throughout the different content, as it shows you all the content on the left, what rank they are in the middle, as well as the unique treasure that may be best fit for the content that you're trying to do on the left here. As you can see, Demia is not necessarily the best option of a tank, but yeah, it's just a valuable option to have just moving forward. Now finally, we'll just kind of move on to a team building synergy guide for you newer players, and we'll just kind of do this in the starter pick of summon and just kind of go over some teams that I may select when doing this. Like I said, this is all my opinion. However, for you newer players, it might be a good idea to just kind of take some of the things here and formulate your own team based on this. So starting out, if I'm going free to play, I would pick Klaus as a tank. I may go Roy as a DPS. As if we're doing a physical team, as a tank, Klaus is a physical tank as discussed earlier. Roy is a physical main damage dealer. We have Gao, who's a physical supporter, and then we'll just go Frey. Now this is a complete free to play team, and actually this will do quite well for you in the long run. Now, since you are selecting a, come the anniversary, you get a 5-star unique weapon and a 5-star transcended level 100 hero, you may decide, hey, I like the physical team, but I may want to decide to, we'll just throw Chase in here, or we can throw, Rebel Klaus once we beat chapter 9. I forgot to mention, but Dark Lord Castle is also pretty good for a main damage dealer for physical as well. Or maybe we want to throw Cecilia. You can just kind of change up the comp based on the main damage, but as long as you have the traditional layout of the slots of a tank, a support or sub DPS, or utility, we have a main damage dealer and a healer. You'll do just fine in about any content. So now something I may choose for a free-to-play Magic team is still going to go with Frey, as she's kind of one of the better free-to-play heroes. Then we have Courtesy, or you could do Lorraine, as you can choose both. In fact, if it was me and I'm starting a Magic team, I would choose both in this team. And I just kind of go with them off the bat. And then what I would do then is use my 5-star Transcended Hero ticket, even though I said not to use it on anything but your main DPS. You kind of get both these characters for free already, so I might go with the tank at that point to kind of round out the team, either Neuraxis or Jhin. But yeah, so it's kind of easy once you kind of get your head around what slots kind of provide which role and who might be good for each of those slots as well. One thing that I will say is once you get to chapter 9, you start to unlock more character slots, and which kind of expands your team building capability. Up until chapter 9, you'll just be using 4 characters at any given point in time. But once you reach chapter 9 or start doing additional content, it'll increase your amount of character slots up to 6. And what I'd recommend for a 6 character composition is 1 tank, at least 1 healer. In fact, I would almost say it's a must to go 2 healers or an off healer such as Lavril or Annette, and then go with you could even do 3 healers in a 6-person composition, and then that would leave you with a support and a main DPS. In fact, that's probably what I would go, because that way you just make sure everyone's staying alive, and not to mention healers oftentimes amp your DPS characters as well, depending on who you choose. So maybe I'd go like Chase. If I'm just going to do a physical example right now, I would do Chase. I would do Shakme, as we already have him. I would maybe go Gao. I would, get Frey at this point. If I've beaten, if I'm getting towards the later content, I would include Fallen Frey and maybe Evan, and that would be my 6-person composition. In fact, that might be what I do in this series moving forward. But anyways, I hope you guys liked the video. Please comment below on what you might be using for your team composition. I'd love to hear it. Anyways, GaijinGamer signing out.